Good morning. I am Leticia Chacon Rodriguez, winery manager and winemaker at the University of California, Davis. And it's such a pleasure to continue from our general session, which is about diversity, into now about her story, a lesson in leadership for the wine business. So this session is pre-recorded, and we're going to have live questions and answers. Please submit your questions through our Zoom Q&A feature in the bottom of your screens. Also, I'm going to inform you, and I'm very happy that Kimberly Charles, who worked hard on this session, she's going to facilitate the moderation at the end, so the Q&A sessions. So Kimberly Charles, she's the founder and president of Charles Communication Associates. So I am very excited. We have an extraordinary speakers, women who have led by example and who are redefining the playbook on leadership. We're going to start with Mimi Castile from Hopewell. She's in Oregon. We have Remy Cohen from Domain Carneros, CEO of Domain Carneros. And Secretary Karen Rose, a good friend of mine and from many years. She used to be also in the Program Development Committee for the Unified, and I thank her for the mentorship on that. So she's at the California Department of Food and Agriculture. With that, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction so we can move into her story. So we have seen that through the time, the role that women have played have risen. And here is just a few links of information that can give us recent highlights or where are we at now. So new studies reveals that still we have ways to go in the opportunities for women. Also, in the wine industry salary survey 2020, we see that this report clearly indicates that there's some gaps. So I'm going to highlight this for you that you can see whenever you see in this column 100%, we are good. When it's less or more, then we are no balance. So definitely on the higher level at CEO, we are 50%, so half of what men at the same position in average are doing. When we're doing 100%, we're doing good. Some work to be done on different areas. Here's another chart with vineyard marketing and sales. So in all of them, we can see the different percentages, and we can see there are some gaps to still need to fill. Leaf Collective developed a little survey about the state of equality in the wine industry. Here is about 554 and 87% female who responded. And as you can see here, there's different generations, different roles in the industry, and experience in the wine industry. So they, according to this, they believe the hiring in the industry is still biased. So it means we still need to continue working on these areas. Also, on this chart, we can see that equality still has a kind of a long time horizon based on this survey. Moving on to the education, I think we're even much better. We have women 60-40 pretty much ratio in the last 2 years here in UC Davis, and the undergraduates enrollment for the last 2 years is being very consistent. Throughout years, we can see how these ratios have been moving. I think ideally we want to have 50-50, which will be great. But nevertheless, we have areas we need to continue working. So now we're gonna hear from each of our speakers her story. And please, again, do not hesitate in submitting your questions in the Q&A Zoom chat feature, which Kimberly is gonna help us with. Thank you very much. Now I'm gonna give the word to Mimi.
Thank you, Leticia. I'm very honored to be with such a strong group of women today. And my story is pretty brief, I'd say, so far, but I definitely thought about this in advance with respect to who my strongest mentors have been, both in and out of the wine industry. And growing up on a vineyard in Oregon, I can say without hesitation that my strongest mentor in my life has been my mother, and she was also one of the one of the faces of our company as I was growing up. And one of my earliest memories is just being in so many rooms with her full of their colleagues. And when my mother enters a room, there is absolutely no question about who is the strongest person in that room. She just presents herself with such poise and such grace, and has always, I think, if anything, mentored me just about how to be in the world and how to really value curiosity and process, and not so much about this is how you do this and this is how you do that. And that is my biggest impression of mentorship in my life. Her sister, my aunt, is also one of the greatest mentors I've ever had. She was a pioneer in environmental policy, in workers' rights, in agricultural workers' rights, in veterans' rights. And so I've been very fortunate to have two of my strongest mentors be in my own family and always around me. But growing up in the wine industry, I didn't see a lot of women, certainly not when I was quite young. I didn't see women at all. And then when I got into, I'd say, high school and getting close to choosing a college to go to, I was, very much on the course to not be in the wine industry. So I kind of stopped paying attention at that time. But going into school for forestry and, ecology and biology, that was really when I think the mentorship that I had received just growing up and just absorbed really became a major strength, because I chose to enter male dominated fields. Going through undergraduate, I supported myself by working for the Forest Service as a firefighter. And that was a time when you didn't see a lot of women on the fire crews, and it was very much expected that you would not make it very far. So I would say I sort of went mentorless for a good deal of that part of my career. And when I decided to leave forestry and go back to agriculture, again, it was because of just having been, I guess, modeled for me, that you follow your heart and you follow your curiosity. And part of what I had learned during that early part of my career in working in national forests and forest ecosystems was just that agriculture is where the future of the world is going to either, turn in a good direction or continue on its current path. And it really, I think if I had grown up with other mentors or lacking the mentors that I had, I wouldn't have believed that I could make a difference. So coming back to the farm was a big decision for me. And I was very supported in that by not just my mother, but also by other women in the industry at the time. And it was really, really gratifying to come back to an industry that now had very strong women leaders in it. And they were not just leading, but leading with such strength and such optimism that I guess for me, I wish that I could say that I felt like I earned this place more than I have, because I think a lot of women have really had to struggle to get where they are. But because the women that I had in front of me and the people that I looked to were so unaffected, I guess, they presented themselves with such an unaffected character of just, I am this person, and very much shoulder to shoulder with anybody else in this room, that I never took the time to really appreciate what it meant to be leading as a woman in any industry until, people started asking me to talk about that. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect on it, and I don't want to take up too much more time, but I think that one really, really important thing for me in having people who work with me is always just, if something isn't working with my team or in my company, I like to look within first and see what it is about the way that I'm leading or the way that I'm managing a situation, because I think that it rarely is really at the feet of the people who are working, with you or underneath you, if you will, but really just about what's being modeled for them. And so whenever there's a problem, I do try to see what role I've played in creating that problem and really own it from the moment that I acknowledge it. I want people to understand that I take responsibility for what's happening. And I just have never appreciated more the women who have modeled for me the kind of person that I want to be in the world.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Mimi. Now we're gonna move into, and I mean that's a fantastic story. It really touches me, and then congratulations on that. And now we're gonna have Remy Cohen, CEO from Domain Carneros. Remy.
Thank you, Leticia, and thank you to all who've organized at Unified Symposium. I really appreciate being part of this amazing panel. And Mimi, I really appreciate what you just said about that self-examination and taking responsibility. Those are really important characters, and we can always use a reminder for that in leadership roles. So thank you. So as Leticia mentioned, I'm the CEO of Domain Carneros. We're a winery in Napa Valley. We focus on producing sparkling wines that are inspired by our owner, Champagne Tattinger. And my career began when I decided to go to grad school at UC Davis and study viticulture and enology. And at the time, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, at the university level, it almost seemed as though there was gender equality. And when we looked at the slide that Leticia presented earlier, it was about 60-40 male to female at that time. And so many of the winemakers that were celebrated throughout the program were female, and they came and guest lectured, people like Mia Klein, Zelma Long, Heidi Barrett. And so I didn't really notice that there was that much of a disparity in terms of gender in the industry. And it wasn't until I graduated and I entered the viticulture side of the industry, so not necessarily the winemaking, I was really surprised at how few women there were in the field. In the Napa community, in the generation ahead of mine, I can think of about 2 or 3 women who served as role models when I was just getting out of grad school and starting to work in the industry. So as much as I admire these women and still do, and have learned from them over the 2 decades that I've worked in the industry, most of my mentors were men that I worked with and men that I worked for. And my first job was as the vineyard manager at Bouchain Vineyards, also here in Carneros, where Michael Richmond was the general manager and one of my first mentors. And he was truly the first person to encourage me to think outside of the box and not necessarily limit myself to just the viticulture side of the industry, and play on other strengths that I have, like communication and my ability to share technical information about wine and viticulture in a way that's engaging and people can relate to. And so it was during my time working with Mike Richmond that I decided that I wanted to become a general manager of a winery. But I was concerned that being a young female, that I wouldn't be taken seriously. I had so many times where people came and would start to address the male intern that worked for me instead of me, to talk about the pump that we were going to purchase and just little things like that. And I just felt like I wouldn't really be taken seriously unless I moved up within a company that somebody like Mike Richmond was able to see my talent and my ability and my leadership skills and promote me within the company. And I had applied for GM jobs and I didn't get them. And it was, in fact, how I ultimately moved up. I was working for another mentor of mine. His name is Cliff Lady of Cliff Lady Vineyards in the Stags Leap District. And I was the director of winemaking and vineyards at that time. And when the president left, he promoted me into a general manager, COO role at the time. And so I really am so grateful for him for his ability to see through the fact that I could be taken seriously and that I could be a strong leader for the company. And I had an amazing decade working there. And so now fast forward to recently, I just became the CEO of Domaine Carneros here this year. And I was so happy and grateful and overwhelmed by the positive response when I announced my job on Facebook and Instagram. But I also realized that I felt that some of the response was partly that people were impressed that I got the job because I was a woman, not just that I had gotten the job. And that I wasn't sure that everybody would have felt that I would have gotten as much attention if I was a man who announced that in my mid-40s, I got the job as the CEO of Domaine Carneros. Yes, I'm so grateful for all those, positive votes of confidence, but it started to make me realize, among a few other things, that while we're seeing these equal amounts of men and women in the university level programs, we are not seeing them when we're getting into senior winemaking positions and senior management positions in C-suite levels at companies. And as we saw in the slide that Leticia presented earlier, there's not only a disparity in the quantity of women, but in the pay that women are receiving in those senior positions. And that is an issue, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And I feel very fortunate, and to the credit of the female predecessors in the field, some of the women that I mentioned before, and people like Mary Hall and Anna Mularaki, who have been on the viticulture side of the field, I always felt that they did the hard work and that I didn't have to continue to have this conversation. And I realize now that it is still an issue, and I'm glad we're talking about it today. And I look forward to the day when the conversation shifts from saying, oh, this is she's a great woman winemaker, she's an amazing female CEO, and it's just, she's an amazing winemaker, an amazing CEO, and we don't have to qualify it. So we're doing what we can at Domaine Carneros and my friends in my community to create more diversity and inclusion in the industry. And I think it's great that the Unified Symposium has taken this as a really important step as well.
Thank you so much, Remy. This is totally right, exactly what you're saying about how when you started, then how you have mentors that are male, because that's what it was before. It was just males in different fields, and especially in the higher, when you're climbing the ladder, it's more male dominant. It's not like we're not against male, we just want equality, that's all. And exactly what you said, Remy, we want to not say, okay, it's a wonderful woman CEO, it's just a wonderful CEO, without being gender bias, and that would be fantastic when we get to that point. So now, my pleasure to introduce Secretary Karen Ross from the USDA. Karen.
Thank you, Leticia. Thank you so much. And it's really an honor to be on this panel with Mimi and Remy. I love their stories, very inspirational. And it's wonderful to be back at Unified Wine and Grape Symposium. As the senior citizen on the panel, I have a very long memory and I have a lot of history behind me with Unified Wine and Grape Symposium. And one of the things I do want to do at this particular forum is call out a longtime friend who was my predecessor, who died late in 2020, Bob Hartzell, who was the president of California Wine Grape Growers for the first 20 plus years of its history. And I still remember being intimidated following in his shoes, because he could play a piano to any tune you'd want to know and make 1,000 friends in the room. And he always wore saddle shoes, and people expected the same thing of me. But my story, it's very different. I grew up in Western Nebraska, which is the middle of nowhere. You can see Wyoming from my ranch there. And I grew up thinking I didn't want to be in agriculture because I was the only girl. I had 3 younger brothers. We always had a number of hired men. Most of the neighbors' kids were boys. And I was just like, I'm not going to be in agriculture. I'm not going to stay here. And it wasn't until I left that I really found out what my passion was, because of the values that I got from growing up on that farm. I also did not have many female mentors or role models. My mom got sick when I was in middle school, and she died when I was a freshman. My dad was my biggest mentor, and it was because he really cultivated the art of positive thinking and wanted us to believe we could be anything we wanted to be. There was no way I could aspire to the job I have today because I had no idea such jobs even existed. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us to think about. Young people can't aspire to things they haven't seen or been introduced to. And it's one way we can invest in the future by presenting those kinds of opportunities. Through a whole bunch of quirky circumstances, I ended up working for a big rancher in the eastern part of the state who got me into politics. And that's when I found out that farming is more than just what happens on the farm or in the orchard or in the vineyard. It's around this issue of public policy and the tremendous impact that it has on agriculture. As a result of introductions from him, I ended up working for a United States Senator. And really, it opened up my world in ways I could have never imagined. And at the time, and this is history. At the time, a woman staffing a United States Senator was still a little bit unusual. You know, can she really type kinds of bad jokes? And I think about that now, and I never let that bother me because my dad gave me confidence in myself. And that's why I always tell men they are so important in the lives of their daughters to help them know that they can be anything, and that how they mentor their daughters is really what creates the equality that we're looking for. I worked for the senator. I put myself through night school 7.5 years to get my degree. And when I finally left his staff, it was another man who saw promise in me and brought me to a statewide association representing public power districts and rural electric cooperatives. I got into the Ag Leadership Program. I got married. And then my husband took a job in California. And I'm like, I just graduated from the Ag Leadership Program. Do they have agriculture in California? What will I do? Because I had totally wrapped my identity into my job. What do I do? Not what am I doing? And I would say the 7.5 months I spent looking for a job in California was the best lesson in humility, as well as gratitude that I will ever have. When I finally got a job because another man took a chance on me, woman from Nebraska, no California experience, but understood cooperatives, and he could tell I was a hard worker. That was the most life-changing experience for me, to go from who am I, I'm nothing without a job, to having my first opportunity in California agriculture and working harder than anyone else in the room, so that when I went in on a bill, I knew what was in that bill. When I went in, I could see the possibilities of where we could negotiate to a better place. And I was willing to do that instead of just who wins and who loses, another important life lesson for me. And it was in that position that I applied for, and who knew, a woman from Nebraska and a Democrat, sorry everyone, would become the president of the California Association of Wine Grape Growers. And that was the greatest experience of my lifetime, being able to work in this wonderful, wonderful industry. It is competitive, but it's also one of the most sharing that I've ever been a part of. And I was lucky to work for growers who really came from different parts of the state and always focused on the statewide position that we needed to take and the good of the whole industry. And I feel like I got to be a little bit of that glue to help make that happen, partnering with the Wine Institute to create the Sustainable Wine Growing Program, partnering at that time with a whole bunch of organizations on wine vision, being a part of creating at that time the National Grape and Wine Initiative, really focusing on the industry as a whole, and how if we focus on the common good, we can really make remarkable things happen. So I've been very blessed. I've been very lucky. I'm thankful to all the men in my life who saw something in me and who knew that that would turn into a chance to be Chief of Staff at the United States Department of Agriculture and the position I hold today. We have a lot of equality in Sacramento in the lobbying ranks. When I was one of only 2 females, and now over half of them are female. About 16 of our agricultural commissioners are females now, and when I first started, there were none. I have 16 colleagues from other states who are also their commissioners or secretaries of agriculture, but I am only the 2nd woman in California to hold this position, and my predecessor in that position, Ann Veneman, is still the only woman to have been Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture. Those are the places we have to keep going. But after we see the year 2020 and the changes in the administration that have happened, little girls are going to see for themselves that they can aspire to be anything. So if we keep working at this, there will be a whole bunch of women, and I challenge every young woman I meet to aspire to be a Secretary of Agriculture. it's a great place to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Rose. Very, very different histories between all of us, I think, and it's fascinating how we come and we can inspire our new generations, and also not just women but men too. As we just mentioned, is men and women. We are just part of the whole, and it's so important to continue making it equal for everybody. Now with this, we're gonna go into our question and answer. Hello everybody. So here we have our question and answers. I'm gonna turn it to Kimberly.
Oh, thank you, Leticia, and thank you to all the panel. And I would love to ask of the audience, as I did in the chat, to please go ahead and send along any questions that you would like to ask of the panel. But in the meantime, to kick things off, I'd love to ask each one in no particular order how they would describe their leadership style. And if you could elaborate a little bit more upon that. Maybe start with Karen, Secretary Karen.
How did I know that might come to me first? Hi. Well, a hallmark for me is collaboration, and being able to keep people focused on what we do have in common, because that's how we build trust, to be able to move into those things where we have the biggest differences. But also, one thing I really try to focus on is making sure that every person in the room has had their say, that we don't just get into kind of that herd mentality and thinking what I say won't make a difference. It's really important to hear all those perspectives to get to the best decision and policy.
Often the quietest person in the room may have the biggest idea.
They're the thinkers, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. Remy, how about yourself? What's your leadership style? How would you describe it?
I would say, well, I definitely agree with Karen in the sense that teamwork makes the dream work. But as far as maybe my management style, I would say that I'm flexible to the needs of both the department and the individuals, because in the wine business, you're dealing with so many different types of personalities and so many different departments within your company. Personally, I prefer to be more like a shepherd and lead from behind, encourage people to take initiative, make their own decisions, have a lot of autonomy. Occasionally that doesn't work. In those cases, I need to be a little bit more direct and instructive. And that's actually a skill that has taken me a long time to develop, but I've worked on it quite a bit over the last decade.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Mimi?
Well, I would like to think I have a management style, but I think mostly I try to be very aware of the, at the individual level, the personalities of the people that I'm working with, and be empathetic to however they're approaching a particular situation, and really try to understand exactly what's brought them there, and, where they might need to go, and where they might need a little push, or where they're going to be just fine. And then I very conscientiously try to be decisive and fearless in my decisions, and own my mistakes, because I expect to make a lot of them. And I think just being really honest about, I'm going to make this decision fearlessly, but I am going to accept when it doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, and let's all learn from that experience. And that's something I think that takes practice. It certainly has for me. It's something I have to regularly remind myself to do, but it has helped me, I think, to just remember that the mistake is where you learn and grow. And so let's all make some.
I would say that fearlessness and humility are great bedfellows. They almost sound counterintuitive, but somebody has to sort of take charge after having listened to so many different views in the room, and what is the best course of action to go from there. Leticia, as the moderator, I would also love to hear your thoughts on academia, and then maybe as a bridge over to that, to hear a little bit more about what you've seen in the world of academia. So first talk about your leadership style, please, but then discuss what you've seen over the course of your time in the field with respect to women in both in the student body, as professors, as leaders, as administrative leaders. And what
Sure. Sure. So I think a little bit of what they have said, Remy, Mimi, Secretary Rose, uh, to be flexible in the leadership style based on the circumstances and the individuals. So to listen to them, to adapt to our group, because every team in any company, in the university, everywhere I've been, is different. So the needs are different. So to be able to listen to those needs and to provide the resources, me as a manager, I like to provide the resources for them, to everybody to succeed, because I want them to grow, to give them the opportunity to be listened and to be taking important part is a teamwork. A little bit more like Remy saying, set in the back, make sure they grow and they make their decisions, they grow, they feel important. Everybody needs to feel important in a team. So that's I believe my approach and leadership, but it's flexible and it depends. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions, you have to have the lead, and sometimes you have to bring everybody together. So it's dependable on the position that you are and the circumstances. In the academia, so yes, right now I'm just looking at the numbers, and if I see the faculty, we're like talking about gender, we're 66% male and the others female on the faculty. In the staff is a little bit reverse, is 62 and 38 or so. So it's reverse on the staff level, but so together we are kind of balanced. But yeah, definitely I believe and there's more work to be done in everywhere. And the University of Davis is doing a great job in trying to promote and include that as part of our culture, the diversity, the inclusion, and to be able to understand and to provide equal opportunities to everybody. And for example, this morning when we were looking at the diversity session, it was very important when they said, let's listen and let's learn to listen so we can grow from it and learn from our mistakes. That's very important to make sure that we're not perfect and we're not expected to be perfect. Everybody's supposed to be, we're humans and we make mistakes, but if we learn from them, I think that's the most important lesson for the challenges that we have. I think everybody was very devastated with 2020, the fires and everything. So, but taking that into a positive approach. So to be always positive, to have a mental positive attitude, for me, that's very important. When I was at Davis, yes, like Remy mentioned, it was like 60% male and 40% female, and now it's reverse. When I graduated from chemical engineering in Mexico, I come from Mexico, it was probably 20% female. It was a very huge majority of male dominance. And even in the workforce, when I was trying to find a job, and this is, I'm talking about more than 30 years ago, so don't do the math. But in that time, the job, it was legal to say the gender that they require. And I was looking for jobs, and all of the jobs for chemical engineer were male, gender male as a requirement. So I was kind of devastated at when I was starting my career, and like looking at this situation, it's like, what am I gonna do? So I decided to get more education. I decided to get a little bit extra. So sometimes it takes you to work a little harder to get there, but don't get disappointed and don't take no for an answer. And that's what I did. So I knocked the doors, even if they say male, it's like, doesn't matter. I do all the other requirements. I'm a female. That's my only disadvantage. And here I am. And then eventually the doors will open, and I will let everybody know that even though you believe that the doors are there, open the doors, knock the doors, and get those opportunities equal to everybody.
I think when you're breaking boundaries, it can be a lonely road. And I really have appreciated what many of you have said so far too, with respect to the listening qualities that you've cultivated in your leadership. And I think when you're a leader and an entrepreneur, you often are looked to for a lot of direction, and you may not always slow down to tune in to what others have to contribute, which could be, a huge idea that would take your company endeavor product further. So I do love bridging over from the diversity panel we just did, the quote that Vinnie Eng used, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm gonna apply that even more to my life for sure. Okay, I'd love another general question, and we do have a question from the audience, which I'll get to, I promise, but another question for the panel. Could you speak to a time when you had a setback or a challenge in your career, maybe not necessarily gender-based, but perhaps it was, and how you overcame it or how you addressed it? I think some cautionary tales or some insights would be helpful to the audience. Let's start with Mimi.
I tried to think back on the many setbacks and pick one that would be relevant here. And I was remembering when I first came back to Bethel Heights was 2005. And in 2006, there was this huge growth in Pinot Noir. We all can acknowledge the sideways effect now, I think. But it was when everybody just was doubling production and couldn't make enough Pinot Noir. And as an estate family vineyard, we were talking about, whether or not to take the opportunity to really grow. And I remember at the time being kind of a small, quiet voice in, a big Democratic family, strong women leaders, but still just a new sort of returning face in the family, and feeling unsettled at the idea of doing something, some very big growth in a sort of reactionary way. And then the big crash of the market in 2008 happened, and we had basically grown our production, and we're sitting on a 2007 vintage that was, it had been rainy, and so the critics didn't review it very well, and we were just sitting with all this wine, and everybody was really, really, really feeling destabilized by this sort of reactionary model that we were in. And I remember just deciding to boldly say, I think we need to scale back to what we originally meant to be and stick to our mission statement and be an estate family vineyard that does the best of what we can possibly do, and spend the next 3 years working our way back towards that. And it was a terrifying decision, and I wasn't a very much minority voice when I first said it, and there was a lot of disagreement, but I held my ground, and we did end up going in that direction. And I think that we're the better for it. But it was definitely a moment where I laid all of my political capital on the table with my family and even some of our advisors, and just trusted myself and continued to trust myself, even when it looked like maybe I had made a bad decision. But it definitely ended up being one of the better ones that we've ever made as a company, and has made us stronger as a result. So it was a setback in that for a good chunk of time, everybody thought that I had made a horrible decision and that I had sort of forced it through. And now I think I know we can all agree that it was actually a good idea.
I think intuition and a balance of intuition and the empirical can make for a very strong alchemy, for sure. Leticia, how about yourself? Any stories about setbacks that you've had?
So I guess I go back to that example when I was like, okay, I'm a female and I got disadvantaged just because of my gender. And so that helped me to focus more on being a little more prepared. And also being from Mexico. So it's a different culture, it's a different background. Be with a different culture here in the United States. Sometimes you find people just have a bias or have an idea who you are just because where you're from. Mm-hmm. And then they say, oh, you're Mexican. Oh, I thought you were from this other country. And then they get like disappointed. It's like, oh, what is about be disappointed about? I'm not from France or Italy or I don't know, whatever, right? It's like, it's not that. It's who you offer as a person. So I think that's a very good to mention that there's still a lot of bias culturally in many places. How we have to listen and to be open to others and to be open and not be biased on what we believe. Is this just because you are what we call Latino, which is a very big, wide bucket? Is much more than that. So Latinos, we're much more than just Latinos. There's a lot of differences. I have many friends from Argentina, Chile, Spain, Colombia, Costa Rica. So they are all very different. And we appreciate that and we enjoy that diversity. So it's richer than just putting people on buckets. And then when we're talking about women, I think it's important to say, yes, we're no men, we're women. We're become mom, and there's a question about that. We're moms, and we get pregnant eventually if you decide to be a mom. That in per se makes a difference organically with males, but that doesn't mean that we are less or more. We're just as equal, and we have the same capabilities. And then, well, we can go to the question that is on the Q&A in a little bit to give chance to the rest of the panel to respond to the question.
I would say too, we're not traveling obviously now very much, and that is starting to change a little bit, but I have to credit technology with actually ironically bringing us closer. I do think that we've been able to have a lot longer conversations through the benefit of Zoom and other channels to explore ideas. So I'm grateful for that. Remy, how about yourself?
I remember quite early in my career getting a new job with a company who had never before had a woman in a senior management role. And the company culture was so different than anyone that I had been used to or I would necessarily create myself. And it was really a really challenging time. And I had the impulse to potentially leave that position, but I felt that it would look bad in my career to not have long enough tenure at that role. And so I had to change my thinking. And at the time I had this realization that they're actually working for me. I'm not working for them. They're valuable to me at this stage in my career, and I just need to shift my mindset. So if I think a 2-year experience would look okay on my resume, that's what they're doing for me, is giving me a 2-year experience. And that mindset completely changed everything with me. And I told myself that they have the opportunity to earn more time after 2 years. And in fact, I wound up really gelling with that organization, having an amazing time, had a very significant promotion at the end of a 2-year period there, and stayed on for years longer. And so I think there's something to be said about feeling in control of your own destiny, even when you're working for somebody else. And that was really, really an important lesson that I learned in my early career.
Thank you. Karen.
This is so self-centered, but my biggest setback was also my greatest opportunity, and that was making the move to California. I'd been very politically active. I had a very high profile in my state. People expected me to run for office. And then I started applying for jobs and on a daily basis being rejected because great resume, no California experience. I never took it because I was a woman. There may have been some of that, but I don't think so. And so just this loss of self-worth and allowing that to define me could have happened. And instead, what I did was I decided I was going to meet as many people as I possibly could. And the first person who would do an informational interview with me actually introduced me to 10 more, who introduced me to 10 more. And I ended up doing volunteer work all over town. And I studied our state. And my husband used to laugh that he had been out here almost a year before I joined him. And I knew more people in 3 months in Sacramento and in the lobbying corps and in the legislature than he did, because I just dug into it and said, this is my new setting. This is what I have to do. And the willingness that people did for me to just give me that first, like, sit down and get to know me, and then to be able to say, I want you to meet these people and use my name. That's a huge generosity. And those are the kinds of things that we don't think about at the time. And in so many ways, I wish that I have spent more time being intentional about that for other young people and other women and people of color. I think I do that, but I think there's a real important message here to be intentional about doing that, that we never know how their life will change because of that, just very brief interaction with me or what happened for me.
I so agree. I remember when I first started in the industry back way too long ago, but I remember the power of the informational interview, you know,
Yes.
identifying people that I respected in the industry. We didn't have the tools of technology then, so it was good old fashioned written letters, phone calls, you know, but people made the time. And when they made the time, it really, you know, I think it helped benefit them, and it greatly benefited me. And to this day, I still do that. I try to keep the conversations briefer because I love a good conversation. But I would say that, you know, to everybody here and to those in the audience too, you know, if somebody has made the effort to go that far to reach you, and hopefully in a compelling way, much like a resume, you know, puts forward, you know, why they're contacting you and what they'd like to learn. You know, value that person's time, but also make the time as a person who can help others. It really, really made a difference. I'd like to address the question from the audience, and I apologize that I'm not aware of who are the mothers on the panel, but the question was, what advice do these ladies have for women in the industry balancing becoming mothers and motherhood and their careers in the wine industry? Who would like to
start? I can start. I'm a mom. I have 2 boys, and it is hard. It is hard, I have to say, but it takes also a lot of effort in your partner. In my case, my husband is a full-time dad, and that allowed me to persuade and be in the wine industry, because the wine industry requires a lot of time, especially harvest. I was really worried when I applied, and I was like, oh, I'm working 16 hours plus during harvest. What am I gonna do? And then the breastfeeding part, it is not easy. I mean, it's a lot of details, and then you have to think about what is more important: your career, your kids, and that's a part where you are very worried about what to do. So when my husband and me decided to have kids, we make that arrangement. Then he's a happy dad, and he's here and supporting me. I couldn't be here without him. So I think in my personal case, I was lucky, or I'm lucky to have that support. But it's not necessarily the same to everybody else. But I think the family also supports a lot, which in my case is my husband, only because we are from Mexico, so our family aren't here. But so in this case, that's what worked for me. But it's very important to dedicate the time and quality time with the kids. It's not just to discipline them, it's not just to teach them, it's just to make them persons and to provide them the tools and the resources to grow as very open individuals and very aware of the reality that we live now, and trying to make them not too biased into what we are grown up and our societies have changed, to make them a little more open-minded and be able to accept and hear opinions that are different from your own opinions. And even if they are opposite opinions, let's listen to them, and there's some truth among all of that, and that will make you a better person, I think.
Yeah, it's great to model for your children and your peers, you know, no better example than that. You know, throughout my career, and I don't have kids, but I will say that the mothers that I have worked with have been among the most organized and buttoned down people. They just know how to use their time efficiently, and, you know, they get stuff done, and it's wonderful to see. Is anybody else on the panel wanting, can they?
Mimi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mimi raised her hand, and then we'll take Karen after that.
No, I'm not.
Oh, I'm okay.
I stepmom.
Okay.
To adults.
Ideal.
Still challenging. I just wanted to say that I can say unequivocally that being a mom has made me better at my job. And at the same time, I think it's still very regrettable that women are placed in almost impossible positions of both self-judgment and being judged from the outside just on the choice of whether or not they want to have children in the first place or can have children in the first place, and then how they choose to manage their careers after they've made that choice. And I think there's so much more opportunity than there ever was for women to find a balance if they choose to have children. But I think that just to put a bunch of empathy and sympathy out there, whatever you decide, don't then just harness yourself to a train of guilt about everything that you do after that moment, because it's such a gift to your children to see you doing powerful work in the world, and you can still choose to be with them when it's the most important thing to you, and make that choice guiltlessly as well. And I think it's also important now more than ever to say, if you think it won't work at your job because of how they've currently got things structured or whatever, that doesn't mean you shouldn't still ask, because I think it still needs to be brought to people's attention that we're not accommodating these things in the workplace. When I had my second daughter, we had 2 other women on the team who were also pregnant, and harvest was coming. I made the big error of just deciding to have a baby during harvest. And so we hired a nanny and had a breastfeeding room in the house and 3 babies in the office. And we just made it work, because that's one of the things about a family business culture that, can accommodate those things. But I think it's happening more and more. And it often takes one brave woman to say, look, I'm going to have a baby and I'm good for this company. So how can we make this work, all of us together? And I think that, again, just don't shackle yourself to any guilt around motherhood, because there's nothing but good should come of that.
Kimberly, can I weigh in on that from a policy perspective? I think one of the best things that's happening is to see more women being elected to, whether it's local governance boards, to the legislature, and more increasingly at the federal level, to really shake up policies that have completely, I believe, forced women to make those choices and carry that guilt, and to take away from corporations understanding how they can make things work and still have fabulous employees by being more accommodating. And I'd say the state of California being forced to do telework. We went from 0 telework is okay to at least 75%. And just to hear the parents talk about what that has meant, even though it's driving them crazy, sometimes being a teacher and teleworking, we just need to shake these things up. And I think the women voices being elected, and even if they know their policy won't pass, they're forcing a discussion that's waking up everyone about these issues.
Yes, it was interesting. Thank you for answering that question. I did some research just before this panel, and Congress now has 27% women in the House of Representatives, 25% in the Senate, and there are 10% of women. 10% of heads of state are women in the world. So we have more to do. Karen, would you say sort of intuitively that start local and go from there if you are seeking political representation or leadership?
Yeah, I think part of it is what your passion is, because oftentimes local is where you can see a more tangible, immediate difference. And for many people, that's where the satisfaction is going to come from, and the passion of knowing I know the faces and the people well that I'm serving. So it can be the school board or the county board of supervisors or city council. But for many people, their passion is about that bigger policy, and they have no fear of jumping in to that bigger arena. And so I just think fortunately, we are diverse. We're all built differently, and we shouldn't let ourselves put self-limitations on ourselves. We should really think about who I am, why I want to serve, and what I would hope to accomplish in doing that, and then pursuing the pathway that will best do that. Because when you're following your passion and you get that sense of purpose of what you can do, then you're going to be really good at it. I intuitively believe that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Letitia shared early on, and Remy, you're kind of in a minority with respect to women in the C-suite over the course of your career. And I'd love to know a little bit more about your personal mission as it relates to creating more opportunities for women to join that smaller group.
Absolutely. I joined Domain Carneros in August of 2020, and we already had a very robust employee onboarding program and training program. And since I've been part of the team, we've really enhanced that to also include continuing education And we also launched a mentorship program, and that pairs up people who are at earlier stages in their career with people on our management team so that they can have customized development opportunities in their career. We also created what we call the Chateau Collective. It's a committee of individuals from different departments. It's created with the intention of team building across departments and also engaging with our community in a meaningful way. So those are some of the ways internally that we're working on career development, employee engagement, employee development at Domain Carneros. I've also joined an organization as the founding member of Chief in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that's an organization that's dedicated to bringing more women into the C-suite. So the members are generally women who are quite advanced in their career at vice president and C-level positions. And our mission is to encourage more women into those types of roles.
Mhm. Congrats on that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mimi, how has your approach to regenerative farming inspired and affected your peers, neighbors, and community? I'm really curious about that. I know Oregon is among a lot of firsts when it comes to agriculture and really community among the growers. But I'm curious about your efforts and how those how it's rippled out.
Well, it's funny. It felt, it just felt like I was talking to myself for a lot of years, but I think we often convince ourselves that nobody's listening. But just like what Karen was talking about, if you believe in something so deeply and you're so passionate about it and you just do it, I think you're going to eventually be acknowledged. And I don't own regenerative agriculture. I certainly didn't make it up. And I think it means a lot of different things to different people, but I've never heard it being spoken of in so many different corners of the community and places that it's starting to pop up in conversations that I never would have expected it before. I get more inquiries every day than, even just 2 years ago, it was still, such a fringe idea and really thought to be an impossible methodology for a lot of types of agriculture. But I think that there's just been a positive shift in mindset because of COVID and some of our big challenges that have slammed into us more like a brick wall, that people are open to ideas that they haven't been open to before. And I think we're starting to acknowledge that the solutions going forward to these massive problems that we have are going to come from places that we didn't know about before. So I would say it's really become a part of the industry conversation in a very short period of time, and I think that's very encouraging. And I hope it just makes a lot of people curious.
Absolutely.
Can I please add to that? This is like, you want to talk about my passion? It's feeding kids, and this about agriculture. Yesterday was a remarkable day for climate change policy, and it just happened to be the same day that we kicked off our dialogue around natural working lands and a climate smart land policy, because the land sustains us and the land can heal us, and we need to heal the land so it can do that. And so the regenerative ag thing, healthy soils, has become the international dialogue and has just increased over 3 years. It was nothing when we started this. And over the last 3 years, it is very real because the climate situation is so severe that we have to do this. And had we not had leaders like Mimi and others, and I'd like to give wine sector a lot of kudos for this, we would not be as far as we are. And this is the only way that we can continue to feed ourselves and have a sustainable future. So kudos to you for that, Mimi. But this is a remarkable time, and there are many, many, many women leading this discussion. Sorry, I had to say that.
I always like to end things like that by saying "a women" instead of "amen," but no, but there's a very seminal article that was out in 750 Daily yesterday about that very topic of regenerative agriculture. So I encourage everybody to take a read. I know we have to wrap soon, but if you can briefly summarize each panelist, I'd like to know, leadership excellence requires a beautiful balance of the triad of mind, body, spirit. And I'd just like to know what keeps you grounded. What if you could say briefly, you know, how do you keep it together for yourself so that you can go out into the world and do what you do? Leticia, let's start with you. I see a bicycle in your earlier photograph.
Yeah, that was in the winery at Davis, my little bike to go around campus. So let's say what makes me be myself and be here. In my case, is my family. I think my boys, they inspire me. My husband. So different from when I come from. I have two sisters, so it was interesting. I grow up with female, and now I'm growing male. So that's interesting combination. But my family is what is my strength, I think. My passion, obviously, the wine industry, but I wouldn't do it without my family.
Thank you. Remy.
I think it's important to schedule time for yourself and have that be as important as a priority as it is for your kids if you have them and your job. And for me, one of the things that I try to schedule is every morning I like to do something dedicated to health and wellness, and usually work with some Pilates or yoga, some other strength training to start the day off right. And I actually find myself to be a lot more productive as a result, and often spend time even when I'm not supposed to be thinking about work. But a lot of sometimes the most creative ideas come up laying in Savasana. So
Exactly.
don't tell my yoga instructor.
I love it. Mine's in the shower. That's truly where the idea.
There you go.
I don't know why. Karen, how about you?
So mine is that early morning workout, whatever it is. I've been a spin addict for the last 5 years, and I'm still resisting buying a Peloton, but I'm feeling like I'm never going to get back to spin with other people. Very important, as well as my Pilates. And just, it's as much for my mind as it is for my body, quite truthfully. But my other one is Sunday mornings. I'm a spiritual person, and that's my battery recharge on Sunday mornings, virtual or otherwise.
Thank you. Mimi, bring it home.
All right. Well, for me, it's really any type of exercise outdoors. And that's usually just, I still do, you know, at least 6 out of my 8-hour days working on the farm. And most days it's much, much longer than that in the growing season. So I've made a conscious choice to, you know, still own the working outside part of this. I mean, doing the labor is important to me to maintain that understanding and empathy of the people who work for me and with me in that way, and just what that work means to me for my mind. And that's where all my creativity comes from. And so I really protect that part of my work, even though, you know, a lot of people ask me, why are you still pruning and pulling brush? It's so important for me, for my body, for my mind, for my understanding of the work, and just the things that I can think about when I'm doing that. It's meditation, it's practice, it's exercise, it's everything for me. So, and it's a connection to the people that I work with, who are kind of the soul of, you know, why I do this work. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much. And I know during this pandemic, you know, mental health is quite fragile all across the boards. And so taking steps towards cultivating a healthy mental attitude is really important. I just would like to say thank you to Unified for putting this panel forward, and all the other panels within the conference. I want to also thank all the panelists for their valuable input and their thoughtfulness and time dedicated to this, and also to the committee who worked hard to make this come to be. And it's just been enlightening and inspiring, and thank you.
Yeah, and please don't forget to also submit your evaluations and to your input. This is for the whole audience, so we can do more and prepare for future programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.